does the word synoptic mean? Generally, it means a general view of the principal parts of a subject, or in the case of the first three Gospels, how they are similar in content and in order and in statement. The Synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. What was the reason, the main reason then, for these three Gospels to be included while John was excluded? It was said that John was not like the others. Matthew, Mark, and Luke contained the stories of Jesus and presented the stories and often in the same sequence and often with identical wording. John, on the other hand, didn't follow that pattern. And in fact, we can see that in the first 18 verses of his book, where he begins it with, "In the beginning was the Word." His approach was more spiritual. Theologians have long debated which gospel came first, as they felt it would establish the others. To try and decipher their findings, let's look at the authors individually, the time of their writing, their purpose, and the point for their writing. Next is Matthew. Matthew was most likely after Mark, between the years of 60 to 70 AD. Primarily, he directed his message to the Jews and refers to Jesus as Messiah from birth to death and resurrection, but he also includes a few scuffles with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Jesus is referred to as King, Bridegroom, Messiah, and Son of David. His purpose is to convince the Jews that this is the Messiah that was promised, and he is. Oral tradition is the retelling of a story. Telling the story over and over, we can see how each author could glean what he thought were the most important aspects of the gospel of Jesus. How might this have affected the story, however? I think there are times when we could see that a story might have been lost or omitted or added in any respect. Therefore, each author would write details from memory, and those details were most prominent to them. Thus, the slight variances in their narratives. But notice one thing is identical: the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Why is that important? Paul tells us, without the resurrection, faith would be futile. What did he mean by that? Simply that had there not been a resurrection, there would be no cause for faith in Jesus. For resurrection from the dead was unheard of in those days. It proved he was the Son of God. The controversies that surround the Synoptic Gospels, although many, we're only going to look at two of them. The two I think that are key. Timelines may not always be exactly the same from gospel to gospel. And the two document hypotheses, which includes oral traditions and mutual use. In other words, they wrote not only with the influences of the people they interviewed, but each other's books. Although it is the book of Mark which is considered the first, we cannot know that for sure. We can say that since all three books agree nearly verbatim of the life and times and parables of Jesus, that the oral tradition had been kept well through the repetition. And so it is come to us to repeat the story of Jesus until that day we hear him say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Thank you.